I'm watching my colleague going through the pitch that, we had both learned. And I'm watching him pitch it. And I'm watching the HR lady on the other side of the table ready to say something and jump in and respond to something, but he's steamrolling all over her. And I had to reach over and squeeze his leg to get him to shut up, because I'm like, she needs some space to talk. Yeah. She wants to respond to something that was said. She wants to share something. We might be going on the total wrong path and she might be about to correct it, but we're not giving her that space to do that.
Hey, Nicole, what do you get when a former corporate CEO and a do-gooding executive walk into a recording studio?
Well, Aaron, nothing, because the two of us are usually on my couch or Zoom, because wine.
You get a podcast created for Gen X women who are bought into the corporate world, but fed up with the BS.
I know. It's how to thrive the 9 to 5 or 6 or 7.
It's career therapy. It's comedy. It's definitely full-on authenticity. Basically, we give you tangible strategies to rise in your career without compromising everything else.
Because work doesn't have to suck.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Because Work Doesn't Have to Suck podcast, where we like to help Gen X leaders who should be at the top of their career, but for some reason, they just don't feel like it. This is Erin. I'm a co-host. My other co-host, Nicole, who I jam with from time to time, is off doing her day job. But this is Erin. If you're new to the show, I am a former CEO turned professional pot stirrer and authenticity aficionado. Basically, I'm totally and completely obsessed with authenticity as a strategy. And this podcast is one of the ways that we just share the authentic love. And we get to do that today with a fellow Greek, although I'm Greek by marriage. She's a real Greek, Fotini Iconomopolous. She is an expert in negotiations, and we can never get enough podcasts and guidance on negotiations, right? She's a speaker, trainer, advisor, and a best-selling author of the book, Say Less, Get More. What a great title. So here are some of the things, if you stick around, that I think you'll find interesting. We talk about what most people get wrong when they're thinking about negotiations. It's all about a mindset shift that is so important to have. We also talk about the one most important thing to do, or really not to do, when you're negotiating. She also offers up, I love this when guests do this, like a powerful phrase, like you can steal this like few words that you would probably never think to say when you're in a situation in a meeting and maybe don't know the answer. I think it just makes you sound like a boss. So she shares that phrase with you. We also talk through a mock scenario, sort of how to approach specifically asking for a raise or promotion, because I just feel like that's something that's a thread that runs through probably everybody that's listening to this. Such an uncomfortable negotiation. It doesn't need to be. And then she also tells a story, and we hear what happened when she pushed back on both her boss and her boss's boss when she found out there was a major equal pay issue. And so you can hear how she approached that and how that turned out. So without further ado, here is my discussion with Fotini. The first question I had for you, was there a moment when you're like, oh, like negotiation is my thing. This is the thing I'm going to, spend the rest of my life sort of talking about?
Well, it wasn't obvious to me, but I was working in consumer goods for a few years. I was working for companies like L'Oreal, negotiating with Walmart on a regular basis. So I was kind of thrown into the deep end as a very young woman. I was the youngest person in the vendor waiting room kind of thing to be negotiating with Walmart. And then it was a company that was hired to train us to be more effective negotiators, and that was probably an intimidating week because I was the youngest one in this pool of 8 people from my company. There was 40 of us getting trained in different rooms. And I was in this group of 8 where I was the only woman. I was a lot younger than everybody else. And I'm in the room with the VPs and stuff. It's like, oh, no pressure. You're just new to the company and, new to this group of people, and you're the youngest and so on. Like, no pressure at all. And I kicked their asses. So I felt like I did really well on that workshop. So by the end of this 4 days together, I had won the prize and so on, and clearly impressed them. So that was a nice little boost of confidence. Mm-hmm. But it was at the end of it when I had one-on-one time with my facilitator. And I said, look, I don't think this is the right place for me. I don't think this is the right career path for me. You've seen people from all walks of life. They claimed they trained everybody from CEOs down to junior folks, where do you see me fitting in now that you've seen my skill set? And he's the one that said to me, you should really be doing what we do. And I was like, yeah, sure. Someday when I have more experience. Because these guys, I was in my 20s still. These guys were well into their 40s and, going all over the world and teaching everybody. And he said, no, seriously, you should be doing what we do. And then he called me a month later and he said, did you think about what I said? And then 2 months after that, he called again. Did you think about what I said? I finally said, I'm going to set up a meeting for you and my boss. And it was 8 months after that initial conversation that I flew to New York and had an interview with his boss and his boss's boss and the CEO of this company. And I left that, I think it was like a 2 to 3 hour interview. And I walked out of that room and I was so invigorated. I had no idea if it went well or if it went terrible. I had no clue because it's one of those case study type of things. They put you on the spot. It was a really weird scenario. And I just felt I had so much fun. I was like, I could totally have fun doing this for the rest of my life. So I think it was that external push as well as the feeling that I had coming out of what was a very intensive case study type of interview. Like they put me in front of a room of the CEO and stuff and said, pretend that we're CEOs of different companies. How would you handle this? And one of them was acting like a real jerk to test my skills because they're going, how is this young woman going to handle herself in a room full of jerks? But I thrived in it and I really enjoyed it. So I think that was kind of a turning point for me in my brain.
So what everybody's thinking, probably, I know I'm thinking, first of all, what was it in that room that made you kick their ass? Like, what were what was it? Was it in your DNA? Had you experienced this as a child? What was it? Do you think, if you had to pin it on a couple of things?
I think if my therapist and I were to dissect it, would probably have come back to childhood. So, I mean, some people know what the big fat Greek family is like, but I grew up in a very traditional patriarchal home where girls were not supposed to do certain things and, speak when spoken to and stuff. And I was always bucking that trend because I think there's a little bit of the nature in me where it's like a sense of injustice is just not going to sit well. So watching, male cousins be able to do stuff and the double standard for women and stuff like that just did not sit well with me. Seeing other people being able to do things and me wanting to be ambitious enough to do other things and my dad saying, no, you can't go away to university. I was like, oh, I'm going to go away to university. It was that kind of constant, even from the time I was really little. My dad, we joke about it today, but my dad really did nickname me the negotiator because I would have been, 5 or 6 years old and trying to fight for some injustice for myself, like being able to go to a friend's house or do something. And I would even jump in for my sister who was older than me or my cousins and so on. And he'd be like, we don't need to hear from you, negotiator. And so it was just one of those things where I think I was naturally instinctively drawn to, I don't want to say fight, but to be assertive about what I wanted. And then at the same time, there was all of these opportunities where, it sounds bizarre today because I know I come to the world with some privilege. I have, white skin and so on. But I grew up in an environment where I watched my dad be discriminated against because everybody assumed we didn't have white skin because we tan really easily, or we had names or accents and things like that. So I watched him get treated really poorly and I heard the derogatory slurs and so on. So I think that also pushed me to go, you're not going to be able to close doors on me. I'm going to walk right through them. I didn't like what I saw from a really young age. There's things cemented in my brain that will never go away. And so I think that combination of the nature and the nurture really did propel me further. So I think that mentality was really branded from a really early time that I just carried forward in every aspect of my career. So even when it was like, you're not supposed to do an MBA without 2 years of work experience, it's like, I'm going to apply anyway. I'll show you. You're not supposed to apply to this company because they need people who have this type of degree. Well, I'm going to do it anyway. It was just one of those things where age, gender, all of those things did not stop me. In fact, they were almost like reverse psychology catalysts for me.
You're kind of the second person I can remember interviewing in the last, maybe 3 or 4 months where it was like that defiance and that negativity actually turned into your drive. I think it's so interesting. And I think a lot of people listening, I hope they think about, okay, what are those things where I was sort of told no or pushed back? And maybe it's made me sing some sucky songs and had some limiting beliefs. And instead, how do you turn that into drive? When we talk about negotiation, let's start in the workplace, because I know you talk about it at home too, which I love seeing that's sort of part of your repertoire, because Lord knows we're doing that all the time. I mean, first of all, what do you think are the key things that people sort of get wrong as they're thinking about negotiation, specifically in the workplace, whether that's for themselves or for the business? What do they get
Well,
wrong?
I mean, there was a word earlier I didn't want to use because this word fight comes to mind. And I think when people hear the word negotiation, or when they think if they want to advance, it's going to be a battle. And that is the biggest mistake. It's that first mentality, that perception of, oh, it's going to have to be a battleground. We're going to war. Like, that is not a necessary attitude to have. In fact, it's one that can get you into trouble. When you go into any type of scenario where you need to be assertive to get what you want, if you can go in there with a curiosity complex, a problem solving complex instead of a combative one, you're going to get a lot further. Not only are you going to have more creative and interesting solutions to move forward, but you're going to put out an energy that people are going to respond to differently, versus if you go in there going, okay, I'm going to go in there guns blazing, I'm going to go in there super defensive. People will read that at a subconscious level and respond accordingly. And that's going to keep people, defensive, instead of going, how can we, lean into this solution with you? How can I be there to want to work with you versus against you? So it really does. It sounds, I don't know, it sounds a little airy-fairy, if you will, but it really starts with the attitude before the aptitude.
What does that look like? Let's start in a place so many people get anxious about. What does that look like if you want to try to negotiate a promotion or a new salary or maybe a job? What does that tangibly look like? The difference between sort of ready for the fight and that curiosity.
So I think when it comes to salaries or any of those types of things, any type of scenario really where you feel like I should be here, this is what I deserve, it almost feels like there's a lot of people who I might think they're holding me down. And sometimes they just don't know, right? So how can you go in there with this mindset of, I wonder if they are aware of all of these cool things that I'm doing. I wonder if they're aware of all of this data and these statistics I have about what people are getting paid for my role. I wonder if they know all of these things that I've been doing and things that I've been accomplishing and accolades that I've been getting and so on. And if you can find a way to go, help me, I don't want to educate them, as opposed to, I need to prove something to them. I do think there's a difference in terms of the language we use, the tone that comes out of our mouths, and the way we lay things out. So it really does come out in the subtleties of what happens. But I do think there's an element too of even just simply asking questions versus making demands.
Right.
You could go in there and say, I deserve this. Or you could say, how do we go about making sure I get paid what I deserve? So now one's drawing us to a path forward in terms of a solution, where the latter, or the previous one, was going, oh, you think you deserve this? Well, let me tell you what I think I deserve. And the two most dangerous words in negotiation are I think, because that's your opinion. And if you're going to give me your opinion, well, my ego tells me I should give you my opinion. And so now what are we doing? We're just arguing about opinions, versus if I were to replace them with based on all of this knowledge that I have, based on all of this research that I have, based on all of these experiences that you may not be aware of, here's where it appears that I should be right now. How do we work on a solution to get me there? What does the reality look like on your end to make that happen? It's just a very different conversation from one to the other.
Yeah, it almost puts the sort of the boss or the decision maker in this feeling of, oh, they're looking for my mentorship, my guidance, my advice, which is a very different feeling than they're looking to sort of tit for tat.
When someone becomes a participant as opposed to something right into it, it's a very different attitude.
I love that. Make them become a participant, right? Because they want to be. That's really good. Do you have any stories of clients of yours who sort of, pooped the bed on a negotiation and then, came back and sort of learned from you and transformed that, so we can sort of see the contrast? Does anything come to mind?
Oh, there's lots. I mean, most people call me in because they pooped the bed and it made a big cleanup. Like, I tell people I can fix things, but I'm much better being your smoke detector than, bringing me jack your truck, right? There's a lot less damage to do if I can come in there early.
That's great.
One client I can recall years ago, and this was kind of one of my favorite, I think, projects I've ever worked on. And it was early in my consulting career. Like, I'd been in the corporate world for a while, but in my consulting career, it was one of my first big projects. And it was like one of those just jump off the deep end kind of things. So this group of executives from a professional services company was negotiating with a bank. And I write about this in the book as well. And it was one of those things where they gave me all of this data. I was looking at all of these decks and lots of documents and all that stuff to prepare for, scoping out what's the situation. So I'd be up to date to go in there and finally have my first interviews with these folks and learn how I can help them. And I'm looking at all this information and I'm going, okay, well, my client has lots of power here and the data says they have lots of power there and so on. So this should be, an easy one. And I get in there and they go, okay, so the bank has been just, down our throats and trying to pressure us into giving them more money and we have no power with them and so on. I was like, did I read the same documents that you sent me? Did I miss one? Because everything I'm seeing objectively says you've got the power in this scenario. But they were behaving as though the bank had them over a barrel. And I was like, this just doesn't make any sense. And it wasn't until I started to point out some of those things that they realized they actually did have more power, that they were dismissing it because they were allowing the bank to dismiss it. It feels like a bullying scenario on a playground too, or this sounds awful, but an abusive relationship type of thing where a narcissist is trying to, convince and gaslight the other person into thinking that they have no power. And it was working. So I said, well, of course the bank is going to say jump because every time they do, you all say how high. So they're going to go, okay, next time I'll ask them to jump even higher. If you're behaving as though you have no power, then they're going to treat you as if they have no power. And it's going to actually make them feel like they're even more powerful. So they're going to get even more aggressive. And we have studies to back up this kind of behavioral norm that I was seeing in that workplace as well. So it took 6 months of us working together to craft every single message that was going to happen between executive versus executive, to create excuses, to have conversations with these folks and drop in some seeds of, oh, maybe they're more powerful than I thought they were. So it couldn't have been like a 180 overnight. Hey, bank, guess what? We're not taking this anymore. That was just going to make them even more adversarial. Like that was just going to get the bank's chest, the back up and so on. So we worked for 6 months in crafting these messages and slowly turning the ship around, so to speak, because you can't take a hard left and everything's going to crash. And this was the biggest negotiation at that time in their company's history. Like if they didn't renew this 10-year agreement with the bank, they would be in trouble. So they thought. But when I started to show them, actually, you have alternatives and the bank doesn't. Now all of a sudden they went, oh, well, this changes things. The power dynamic shifted and we needed to find a way to show the bank that the power dynamic shifted without poking the bear in such a way that the bank was going to get extra aggressive. Because sometimes people will spite their nose to cut their face. I know I'm using so many awful analogies right now.
That's all right. Idioms are welcome.
But it was one of those things where sometimes they will do things to harm themselves because their ego is so bruised. And so we needed to make sure we kept that in balance as well. So the negotiation actually happened over the course of 2 years. They called me at the 2-year mark before the expiry date, if you will. We worked together for 6 months. And then for the last 18 months, they were coasting. They were doing it on their own without my help. But it was that first 6 months of turning things around that made them successful. And it's probably one of the most rewarding ones I've ever done.
Yeah. I love that. The planting of the seeds. I mean, what I hear from that story too, is I think you're right. I think so often it's easy to assume the power is based on sort of the bravado and the personalities versus the facts. Right? Facts are, okay, well, let's think about what would happen if we walked away from this. Well, they'd be screwed. They'd have to scramble for this, whatever. So I think that's a really important point. We often hear sort of the old adage, to be cliche and add on to, not that you're cliche, but to add on, is that the person that cares the least has the most power. Talk to us about that. Do you agree with that? Is there anything in that?
There's truth to it. It's the person who appears to care the least, I think would be more accurate. Yeah. Because appearances are what matter just as much as actual power. So I always talk about how perceived power is just as important as actual power. So my client had loads of power, but they didn't recognize it. So how would the other folks even recognize it? So they were just operating on a very different assumption. But if you go in there looking desperate, then the other person is going to go, great. Then that means I have lots of power and I can take advantage of this situation. But if you look like, I don't care about the outcome of this, then the other person goes, oh no, they don't care. They could walk away. What do I do to convince them to care and to actually get involved in this negotiation with me? So there is an element of perception. We do have to keep in mind, though, the objective reality, too. Like you can't just go in there, puffing out your chest and acting like it doesn't matter at all when if they're going, well, it doesn't matter to me either, then you're screwed if it really does matter to you.
Right.
in the real estate world, we make a joke about you don't fall in love with one house, you fall in love with three. Because if you fall in love with that one, you're going to pay through the nose for it. But if you go, hey, I have some alternatives, maybe they won't be as good as this one, but I have some other ones, it does give you a significant amount of power. And as a result of that, you actually behave differently. Your brain performs differently. You're going to actually have a better outcome because of your attitude, the way your neurons are firing. And it's the same when I talk to my students, like when I talk to MBA students who say to me, I don't know, can I really negotiate this offer? There's 500 other people who applied for this job. And I'm like, but they're talking to you. I know you really want it. But guess what? Out of those 500 people, they chose you. So it's not like they're just walking away to the next person on the list. They invested time and energy and so on. So if you can handle the conversation in a way where you're not turning them off and making them run screaming to the next person, and there's lots of collaborative ways to negotiate, then there shouldn't be any risk to having a conversation with them about how to make it a more sustainable one.
Hey, Erin here. Look, I am so happy you're here listening to the Because Work Doesn't Have to Suck podcast. But I'm also guessing that some days it can be tough to get over here. And you may not always have the time to throw in your earbuds for half an hour or an hour. So if you also want career and leadership tips, inspiration, and quite frankly, professional pot stirring, the best bite-sized way to get that from me is to connect on LinkedIn. Almost daily, I share tips, inspiration, and humor to help you, maybe your less than authentic boss too, be more authentic at work. You can find me by searching my name. I'm literally the only Erin Hatzakostas in the world, or at least the online world. So if you can spell it, you can find me. Or we make it easy. You can scroll down to the show notes and click the link there. See you there. I'd love to tell you quickly about my second biggest negotiation of my corporate career when I was CEO. And I love you to sort of analyze it. So it was a large vendor of ours. We were pushing them to get onto a more stringent contract. So the company I was running was bought by a larger enterprise, right? And so it was like year 3 of the overlords in procurement going, your contract is like rickety shickety. They need to get on our big badass contract. And of course, our vendor said, well, yes, but that'll cost you, right? Like all of these provisions and stuff will cost you. And we had no money to be costed. Like we could not, we were struggling financially at the time. And an increase to our largest vendor was just not something we could stomach. And so I remember preparing for this in-person meeting with their executive to kind of kick off negotiations. But then I think he got sick or something, couldn't make it. And we had to do it over the phone. And this is back in the day where you're literally on the phone, right? So you're looking at a phone monitor, right? Like no faces, like, and I honestly just wasn't ready. And so I blurted out, and I talk about this in my TED Talk. I just blurted out, so what's important to you in this negotiation? And I think because he wasn't expecting it, right? He didn't have a canned answer. So he told me the truth. And so he sort of went on about, we're going to go public in a year or so. Long-term contracts are important, right? With our major vendors. And so I quickly knew, like, if I can give him a 10-year deal, because we would do kind of long deals on this, and then he said, he reciprocated. He said, what's important to you? And I literally blurted out, I was interim CEO at the time. I said, well, I'm interim CEO right now. And if I get this deal done well, it's probably give me a better chance of becoming the real CEO. And I want that. And, I tell this story because my whole platform is about authenticity. And what happened from there was he kind of fought for me because he liked me, right? He wanted me to win, and people like to try to help people win. And part of the negotiation was procurement to procurement. So as business leaders, sometimes our alignment was different than theirs. And long story short, they ended up giving us a decrease, not an increase. Like it was a super successful outcome. Anything from that, you're like, you just got lucky and you're a fumbling idiot, or anything that you teach in that.
No, it's not luck. I mean, so many of the principles that I teach are popping out obviously to me in so many things. So you must have had some good relationship with that individual for him to be able to trust you enough to open up.
A little bit of a rapport. I had a little bit of a rapport, but not long. But I think what I teach is authenticity is like a fast pass to trust and connection. So I think because I was so ridiculously authentic and open.
Yeah.
That probably sped up our relationship right there and then.
Yeah. It doesn't have to take forever to build trust. It can happen in just a short conversation, right? So we like people. When I think about the likability factor, and again, this is something I think I talk about in the book, but it's one of those elements of negotiation and persuasion that comes up over and over. We like people with whom we have something in common. We like people who are cooperative, who aren't banging their fist on the table, but who are asking us questions and taking an interest in us. We like people who are paying us genuine compliments. So you were using this likability factor by saying, hey, if I share something and I acknowledge you and I ask you a question, because people just want to be acknowledged at the end of the day. They want to be, right? So that's the likability factor. It's those compliments and things like that. And just you asking that question, what's important to you, is actually a compliment to go, you want to know what's important to me. You're not coming in here just making demands on me right now. That's enough to make people want to find a way to work with you. Again, it's a participant versus being forced along. Now, you needed to do some trust building. It could be 30 seconds worth of trust building in order to get them to want to answer that. But you might have been sharing and doing some candidness and some likability things and finding those bits of things in common. And even the water cooler chat, even on the phone, because most people want to get down to business right away. And they dismiss the fact that even in this Zoom world that we have now, it's different than when we do things in person. When we do things in person, we would have met in a hallway. You probably would have walked me down the hallway to get to the meeting room. We would have chatted about the weather. How was your drive in? Or what'd you do this weekend? We have those moments to find the likability factors, to find something in common. But when the Zoom starts these days, people want to go, okay, I guess we're here. We're seated. We're at the table. I guess we should get started immediately. They don't build in that time for the likability factor. So you probably had that going for you over the course of the conversation before you even launched that question, what's important to you? And as soon as you ask that really important question, if he feels vulnerable enough to share his answer with you, now you can reciprocate and share your own with him. And because you share something, he wants to share something and vice versa. This is the element of reciprocity that we have as a social norm. So we're using that to our advantage. And then you go, light bulb goes off. I just found out what's valuable to him. Long-term is really important. I can provide that long-term, but we're going to trade something for it. If you can do this thing that I need that's going to get me promoted to CEO, then I can do this thing that you need that's going to get you the longevity and so on and so forth. So that for me is like, it's textbook. It's brilliant. You're actually, without knowing it, you're pulling in all of the tricks of the trade, if you will.
Yeah. I think sometimes with negotiations, and tell me if you disagree, people probably try to over prepare. I know that's part of what you do. You help, like the example you gave, but there's probably got to be an element of preparing. I don't talk about how do you prepare strategically, but not over prepare so you miss those moments of likability and authenticity, et cetera.
I do think there's an element of, it's more so, I think, in sales than negotiation. In sales, people will want to go, okay, I've got my deck ready. I've got all my, unique selling points ready. I'm going to hurl all of them at these other people. And I've rehearsed them so well and I know them inside out. I want to make sure I get them all out there. And they forget to pause to go, what's the response to those things? How are they receiving those things? And in negotiation, I want my teams to be really well prepared, but we also have to pause and ask, what do we think their responses are going to be? Like, we have to prepare for those moments. Like, I can recall even doing a download with a group that I worked with on a price increase scenario or a big launch or whatever it was. And every time they went in for a meeting, we'd have a big phone call. They were down in Seattle and Chicago, and I'm in Toronto, and we're having this phone call. How did it go, folks? Oh, Fotini, was exactly like we were expecting. We said this thing and then they said that, and we were ready for that question. We were ready for that response. Like, we anticipated some of the needs on the other side. And then they stopped to listen. They told us this thing, which was new. So for the next meeting, we're going to be prepared for, such and such, to adjust our proposal to this. You really do have to take that time to pause. Like, one of the many reasons I call my book, Say Less, Get More, is you need to say less to listen to what they're giving you. You're going to get a lot more if you listen to what they are sharing with you. So the fact that you could pause we would prepare questions. Like, we would have that question ready to go, what's important to you? That would 100% be a question that we're going to ask whenever I'm working with a group of people. So the fact that you ask and then pause and actually listen to what can I do with this? Yeah. That's the part where you need to give yourself some flexibility to not just be steamrolling over them going, I'm going to hit every USP I want to talk to them about. I'm going to hit every single slide in that deck. You might throw out half the slides because you need to have the flexibility within the framework that you just created to be able to listen to which of these slides is most important in this moment. I'm going to be prepared with all of them, but I don't have to use all of them.
Yeah. I think that's so good. It's like this preparation. It's like my next book's called The 50% Rule. All I think of is the 50% rule. It's like, half prepared, but half, ready to sort of listen and improv. And I think that is a skill set that is important, but probably gets easier if you're prepared and expecting that part of that preparedness is to sort of improv, right? So let's talk about the book. I love the title, Say Less, Get More, Unconventional Negotiation Techniques to Say What You Want. Thank you for having the poster. I didn't have to look at my notes. We've talked about a few techniques. I love unconventional. I hate normal, and I'm a sucker for unconventional. Give us a few of those unconventional negotiation techniques that you talk about in the book.
I mean, the easiest one is just the act of shutting up, right? It's just literally saying less, because again, I have over the years, the first people who call me in are the salespeople, because everybody in sales knows I can use negotiation skills.
Yeah.
It's not until I get on stage somewhere or something that doctors and marketers and lawyers and all these other people go, oh, I could use negotiation skills in my life. So what I find with a lot of the folks that I was training over the years, is, again, they were just ready to go, I'm going to be ready to say this. And I watched it even in my own organization when I was a consultant for another company. And I was the junior person coming along on a sales pitch for this, to pitch training for their entire sales team or their procurement team. And I'm watching my colleague going through the pitch that, we had both learned. And I'm watching him pitch it. And I'm watching the HR lady on the other side of the table ready to say something and jump in and respond to something, but he's steamrolling all over her. And I had to reach over and squeeze his leg to get him to shut up, because I'm like, she needs some space to talk. Yeah. She wants to respond to something that was said. She wants to share something. We might be going on the total wrong path, and she might be about to correct it, but we're not giving her that space to do that. Yeah. So I had to physically stop my colleague from talking. And that kind of is burned into my memory. But I can also think about times where I've been in the workplace and I've witnessed people, the ones who are the greatest negotiators are not the ones, the perception is that, when we watch pop culture movies and the slick back power suit kind of fast talking guys, everyone's like, oh, they must be the world's greatest negotiators. No, that's fiction. That's entertainment. That's not how real life actually works. And when I first started in the consulting world, when I was negotiating for a living, if you will, people were like, oh, your job must be like that show Suits, or your job must be so much fun. You must be arguing with people all the time. It's this perception, this conventional perception, this norm that we think is going to get us somewhere that actually backfires. But if I can sit there quietly, it's the introverts of the world. I tell them, you can rejoice. You know how to shut up. You can be great at negotiating. Those are the ones that are listening to the information and that knowledge that is coming our way. And if knowledge is power, how else are you going to get it? If you're not listening, if you're not just shutting up and giving the other person airtime, people will talk themselves into or out of a deal if you just give them enough space to be able to do that. So it sounds bizarre, because so many people over the years have said to me, but if I don't say something, they're going to think I'm stupid. If I don't say something, if I don't answer their question, I'm going to look like an idiot, or I'm not going to look credible, and so on. I'm like, there's lots of ways to look credible and still be quiet. You might take over that quiet and say, I need a moment to think about that. And instead of looking stupid in the deer in headlights, they're going to go, oh, they're taking a moment to think about what I said. I feel acknowledged right now. I feel so important right now. I feel like whatever's going to come out of their mouths is going to be credible and authoritative, because they're not just thinking and talking at me. It's those little things that can go a really long way to change how credible we actually show up. And so especially for, people who might be worried about looking stupid, I give them ways to frame up that silence to make you look far more credible, to give you that space to be, I'm in charge here, as opposed to giving you time to steamroll over me. Because so many women, especially in the workplace, will say to me, if I stop talking, they're not going to stop interrupting me. But if you say, I need a moment to think that through, or in order for me to give you the appropriate answer, I need to work out what that means for us. Or ask them a question. If you're really uncomfortable with silence, ask them a question so that they can do all the talking, and you're now getting to say less and think it through, even if it's a question you already know the answer to. So nothing's changing. You're not missing anything while you're thinking through, what do I need to do in this instance right now? But I feel like the most simple of all of it is to just pause and take a moment to breathe. When I'm talking from the stage all the time, I have these little pause cards. I know your audio listeners won't be able to see this, but there's a little card I give out with a pause button on it that says use frequently in moments of stress. And, I send them out electronically to my audiences too. So they have it, they use it as a screensaver and so on. And one of my students once said to me, he goes, I have them all over the house. I have one on my night table. And I go, why the night table? And he goes, now I don't get into arguments with my wife. That simple moment to pause and reflect instead of being reactive can make a world of difference in terms of how people are going to respond to you and how you are going to actually verbalize whatever it is that you want to say. It sounds silly and it sounds trivial, but it can be life-changing for so many people.
Hey there, it's Erin. I'm just popping in real quick to ask you a question. Is there any chance you know someone who is looking for a keynote speaker for their upcoming event? Look, I know that many event organizers, they struggle to find a speaker who provides both tangible value and business knowledge, but that also lights their audience on fire. And I truly believe there aren't many speakers like me out there who are both former corporate executives and professionally trained speakers. And there's definitely none that roll in with an orange suitcase they unpack with their audience. Trust me on that. I would love nothing more than to bring my message of using authenticity as your strategic career and business advantage to people spinning in your universe, especially if you'd be there. I promise my talks always create an immediate buzz, but not just right after, but for months and years after the event is over. You can learn more about my message, style, and reviews, and share my speaking info by going to beauthenticinc.com/keynote-speaking. That's B, just the letter B, authenticinc.com/keynote-speaking. Or of course, we have it right in the show notes to make it easy for you too. Back to the example of, the sales or maybe any sort of big negotiation meeting. Is there something about having to change the metrics for success? Because I think about, I spent years and years and years in B2B business, right? And that's where I spend most of my time working with them on the authenticity stuff. They're so addicted to the information puke, right? The 79 slides, and let me make sure we get all of our features and functions and philosophies out, that they get anxious that they're not going to get through that or something. Is that any part of it, like reframing your mind of what you constitute success away from getting through, the full slide deck and information versus letting people talk? And, what do you talk? Do you talk about metrics for success?
Well, metrics for success for me are, when I start a project with anybody, I'll ask them, what are your objectives? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And for some people, it might be, we need to get 5% growth, or we need to get this launch done in X number of stores, or we need to get a percent increase of prices and so on. So we go, okay, this is what we need to get done. There's a number of ways in terms of how we can do that. There's a number of tactics we'll figure out. But before we can go any further, we also have to think about, what are their objectives on the other side of the table? Are they in the realm of possibility? Are they completely opposed? Is there any overlap in terms of, ways to collaborate together? And that'll help us to figure out, what is the best strategy going forward? How can we predict any hiccups along the way? Or where is our biggest piece of work going to be to convince them otherwise, maybe even to change their objectives? Is that even possible? So we really need to think about those two things in order to be successful. So for me, we do get the metrics up front to go, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? Too often, though, clients will try to tell me, I need to get into X number of stores. And when I ask why, because usually it's something like, I have a launch, I have a product, I want to get it in every single, Walmart store across the globe. And I go, why? And they go, well, because we need to get to 5% growth. I said, oh, so it's not the number of doors that matter, because you could be getting into a crappy door that's going to get you no sales and no visibility. No one actually walks into that store. But it's the 5% growth. What if 5% growth could come from a bunch of other factors? And then they go, oh, so we need to dig into, usually that list of what are your objectives, you would assume it's a very quick 5-minute conversation or less. It can take hours sometimes, because we're going to have somebody from finance in the room, somebody from sales in the room, somebody from marketing in the room, and they're going to have all sorts of objectives. And we need to get all of us on board to figure out what is the true objective that we're trying to accomplish here. Yeah. And then we have to spend a lot of time debating, what do we think they're really trying to accomplish over there? They might have said these words to us, but what's behind those words? What are they actually trying to accomplish, and so on? And so that in itself can be a very robust conversation that can eliminate a lot of inefficiencies when you're having these conversations. So I don't think that people are focused on the right metrics sometimes.
I think that makes sense. And I was just thinking also too about metrics for success for a meeting, right? I once had a coach when I was prepping with her, for a big meeting with our enterprise CEO. And she's like, well, what are you going to, I was like, I'm going to talk about this. And she's like, what if your number one goal is simply connection? And then we unpacked, what did that mean? That surface level connection, and it sort of changed how I talk about it. And it seems like that's a big part of what you're saying and doing when you go into those meetings. It isn't, your metrics for success is about the likability, the trust, the connection, the getting on the table what's important to them. And I think that's really important. Let's swing a little bit. Unconventional method. What's your top unconventional technique for negotiating at home? Whether that's with a partner or a child, parent.
I think my favorite, and this is something, I mean, I grew up with a big fat Greek dad who is very combative. My mom likes to joke that if you've ever seen the movie, I'm dating myself now because I know it's a very old movie, but her favorite line from the movie is, the man is the head of the family, but the woman is the neck. Yeah. So how can you get them to turn in the direction you want them to go? And I think the easiest tool to be able to do that is by asking questions. And so it might seem a bit unconventional because I came from a school of thought where I was told negotiators don't ask, they tell. But yet questions are your tool to get them to do what you want without making them feel like they've been told. So for example, if I was babysitting my nieces when they were little, and I would say something like, which vegetable do you want for dinner? Do you want the cauliflower, the broccoli, or the carrot? I'm actually asking them a question, but the form of my question is forcing them. I'm anchoring the fact that they're choosing only from vegetables. Yeah. They feel as though they have some choice in the matter. They feel as though they have some sense of autonomy as they're choosing their own destiny. They don't have a chance to think about junk food as an option and so on. So just by asking that question and providing those options, I'm making them feel like it's a cooperative scenario instead of I'm literally or figuratively shoving things down your throat. Right. So those types of things work. With adults, it's the same thing. I mean, I use that same technique in the boardroom with clients all the time, but even at home, it would be like, so, if you were to ask your spouse or your partner, why did you do that? They're going to feel super defensive. And because it's the one question that can get us into trouble when you ask someone why. They're like, why are you challenging me like that? But if you were to say, what caused you to do that? Or what made you choose doing it that way? Now it comes off as much more curious. And if I'm curious about you, you feel acknowledged, you feel listened to, you feel like I'm taking an interest in you as opposed to I'm attacking you. So when you can ask a how or a what question, instead of saying, do it this way, or what do you think would be the best way to do this? Is it this option or this option? Now, all of a sudden, you're leading them where you need them to go, but they don't feel like they're being pulled. Yeah. And so that it's the subtlety of those questions that can go a really long way without making people feel attacked or without making people feel like they're being forced into something.
Yeah. I think there's so much power in the what, and it's a great reminder because it's so easy to slip back into but there's something, really powerful by simply changing why to what. I don't know, what it is, but you need to be reminded, right? Because life is busy and, families run fast.
We go into naturally reactive mode. Yeah. On autopilot all the time. So if you can pause and say less for a split second, instead of being reactive or autopilot, to just reformulate that question from a why to a what. It's so simple. It only takes a couple seconds of, let me take a beat. Okay, I have the right question now. And now I'm preventing 5 minutes of arguing by just 10 seconds of pausing.
Yeah, I love that. So two final questions. We like to do a story about Buck That, which I think we mentioned in the pre-information. But is there a story that comes to mind of when you sort of bucked the norm, bucked the trend, and great things happened?
I mean, there's so many stories, but
sounds like it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like my whole life has been bucking the trend. There's one story of failure, I think, for me that would be really important for your audience to hear. And I decided at the very last minute to include it in the book. It's in the epilogue. I haven't included all of the details for some legal reason, but I was in a scenario where I found out I was being paid less than my male peers. Now, this coming from somebody who has been fighting for, advocating for equity and all that kind of stuff forever. And always advocating for myself. I never hesitated to ask for a pay raise and all of those things. So when it came to my attention, because my peers were complaining to me about their salaries, and I went, hang on a second. And I went to my boss and I said, look, it's come to my attention that there is a discrepancy that needs to be fixed. So, I can't lay my head on my pillow at night if I don't talk to you about this. And so when I raised it, he said, "How dare you?" And I was like, wait, what? Like, it was just one of those things. First of all, I was bucking the trend by even raising it. So many people had been telling me all my life to never do that kind of thing. You should be grateful for what you have and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, screw that. Um, and, and so I'm raising it and he's telling me, "How dare you?" And I was like, why would you even say that? He's like, you can get fired at this company for talking about your salary. I'm like, actually, you might want to brush up on the law because that is not the case. But regardless, that's not a problem. Well, we frown upon it here at this company. I said, okay, well then you can frown over to my friends over there who are sharing with me because I've not shared anything. So it's not me that is the problem and the solution, but this information has landed in my lap. So now we need to do something about it. And he said, well, so-and-so has that because he brought in such and such big client. I go, no, he didn't. I'm the one that did. If you need to see the emails, here's the chain and so on. And he goes, well, the other guy has this because he grew that other client into $1 million client. I'm like, no, that's not true either. I'm the one that grew it. And I grew it so much that I enlisted his help in it. That's why we're at the spot we're at. So I had all this proof. Now, part of it was he was a misogynist who just had his eyes closed to do anything that I did. And part of it was we believe that we live in a society where we're a meritocracy and people will just notice these things. And I needed to be more vocal. I'm not quiet about my accomplishments. I'm a pretty confident woman. And so I was not quiet in that office either, but I could go months at a time without ever talking to my boss. It's not a shock that he didn't know. He didn't take an interest in me because I was the only woman on the team. He took an interest in these other guys. So it was me now correcting this and it still didn't matter to him because then he just went, I stuck my neck out for you and blah, blah, blah. And then I went, I had this out of body experience where it was almost like I was watching myself from a balcony. And I went, you are not going to give him the satisfaction, Fotini, because he has called me emotional in the past. Mm-hmm. And when he did call me emotional, the one time he did say it out loud, I said to him, thank you. Thank you for recognizing my passion. It's my passion that gets shit done around here. So I tried to constantly reframe what he was trying to sully for other people. And so I'm watching this experience and going, I'm not going to let him turn my passion and my advocacy into him going into the boardroom and saying she was emotional and she was this and she was that. Mm-hmm. When I was ready to launch through, we were on Skype before Zoom was even a thing. Like we were having these video calls. He was in either London or New York and I'm sitting in my condo in Toronto. And I wanted to launch through the screen and just strangle him. But I didn't. Obviously, I couldn't. But I just paused. And this is, I think, where that pause button was born for me. And I went, thank you. And he was so confused. And he just stopped. And I said, well, you said that you stuck your neck out for me. And so if you and I have this, manager-managee relationship where I'm supposed to trust you, then I appreciate that. Thank you for sticking your neck out for me. And all of a sudden he calmed down. So like the yelling stopped and his defensiveness stopped and all that stuff. And that's when I went, I'll take it from here. And he went white. Like he just went, I don't think you should raise this with HR with our boss, like then almost CEO or whatever. And I said, well, you said you stuck your neck out for me. You said there's nothing else you can do about it. So if you can't do anything further and I told you I can't sleep at night, knowing I haven't done everything I could possibly do to fix this, then I'll take it from here. And the call ended shortly thereafter. A couple weeks later, I'm in the New York office. The guy from London, the head honcho, has flown in. And I said, here's what's going down. It seems as though we have a discrimination issue here. And he said, look, Fotini, I don't know what you get paid. That's between you and, your manager. And I said, well, I raised it with my manager and it's still a problem. Like it's come to my attention that the numbers don't make sense based on my performance. I'm hitting all my bonuses. I'm hitting all the performance metrics. I'm the top performer and blah, blah, blah. I'm ready with all of the stats and all that kind of stuff. And he said, look, I know what you're getting paid and you're getting paid exactly what you should. And I was like, but a second ago, you just told me you don't know what I'm getting paid. And now you're telling me you do know what I'm getting paid. So which of those statements is more true? And he was like, I can't believe you're being so patronizing. And now I'm here in my own head screaming, wanting to lash out at this person. That is exactly what, my instinct is to do. My reactive autopilot mode is screaming at me to do. But instead I'm pressing my pause button and I'm going, I'm not going to give him the satisfaction. And I go, well, what did I say? So I'm launching it with questions and being curious. What did I say that was so patronizing? I don't remember. And I said, well, when you remember, you let me know. And then if there's something that I did wrong, I'll apologize, but I don't know what I've done. And you can't seem to articulate that. So I don't understand why we're not having an adult to adult kind of conversation. So if you don't think we can come up with a solution, then perhaps we shouldn't. If you're the one getting emotional, I even remember saying to him, I'm a Mediterranean woman. We wave our hands around and we get really emotional when we talk. And I'm doing my best to keep as calm as possible to make sure we're having a productive conversation. If you can't make that happen, then perhaps we shouldn't continue this. And so he said, yeah, maybe we shouldn't. And I walked out of that office and I never walked back into it ever again. Like that was the beginning of the end. So I had already hired, by the time I had my first conversation, excuse me, with my manager, I had already hired a lawyer because I knew this was a legal situation. And so, 2 weeks later, my lawyer was well in the loop of all of these conversations that I was having. And it wasn't until 6 weeks later that I ended up leaving that company. And all of my correspondence for 6 weeks with my manager was through a lawyer. I was still serving my clients. I loved my job. I was still going on the road. I was still traveling all over the US and Canada and serving everybody and enjoying my job. But I walked away from something that it was a failure in one sense that I didn't get this salary thing fixed. I wasn't going to change a misogynist. I couldn't fix that problem. But what it did do is it cemented to me, okay, you can't fix them. This is not the place for you. This is not where you're going to thrive. And I find too many people will stay somewhere. Now, I also understand I have privilege. I didn't have kids or dependents and things like that to worry about. I also knew I had made so many great relationships over the years that I had lots of clients who raised their hand and said, whenever you quit, we want to be the first phone call. I knew I'd have a soft landing somewhere. So I'd set myself up for success. It wasn't luck. It was that I had opportunity.
For sure.
But it was that thing of like, I'm not going to stay with the devil I know. I'm going to go into this. I have no idea what's out there for me. I'm going to talk to the lawyers and all that stuff. And that's intimidating. Like I just read an article the other day about a woman who said she was fired as soon as, or her offer was revoked as soon as she asked about a maternity question because they suspected she was pregnant, broke the offer. And someone's like, why didn't you pursue it legally? And I'm like, I know exactly why she didn't pursue it legally, because it's exhausting, because it's costly, because the bar is so high, all of those things. And so for me, that was bucking the norm to be able to go, I'm going to take this all the way everywhere I have to take this, because that is my social justice, fire in my belly that's saying, I need to do this to sleep at night, to rest my head on my pillow. And I need to leave this job that everybody thinks is so cushy and so secure and all of that stuff and so amazing, where you're traveling all over the world. And what are you going to do next? I'm like, I don't know, but I know whatever it is going to serve me so much better than this. And so to walk away as somebody who's not a risk taker, to walk away from security and walk into complete unknown seemed bizarre, but it was just the right thing to do. There was no doubt in my body that it was time for me to leave and to who knows what, but what was going to be better than what was facing me at that moment.
Well, and it seems like it worked out.
I mean, it was amazing. My phone was ringing off the hook as soon as I walked out of there. And I have an incredible support network that I created. I'll take credit for it.
Yeah.
I built those relationships. Sure. I nurtured them. I enjoyed them. It wasn't for the purpose of, hey, I need you to save me someday. But it was an incredible experience. And I'm so glad that I kind of knit this really incredible net of people who were there to catch me when things were about to change.
I love that. Well, I have one last question, but before I do that, where's the best place for people to follow on with you? Obviously, read the book, Say Less, Get More. I mean, who doesn't need that? But where can they go?
My website is FotiniIcon.com. I'm in the process of uploading new guides and new resources there for everybody. There is a resource there right now. If you go to FotiniIcon.com/quiz, you can take your negotiation style quiz and learn a little bit about what are the pros and what are some of the watch outs for your natural autopilot mode instincts. LinkedIn is an obvious one too. I share stuff there all the time. Instagram, ironically, I actually use more frequently for all sorts of Q&As. So I do a lot of ask me scenarios there. So you can see lots of stuff saved to my highlights there as well. All of it's at Fotini Icon. So super easy to find me everywhere.
I love it. I love it. So I guess we'll just last question. What would be one final tip to help people have work suck less?
I mean, I read an incredible book called The Upside of Stress. I do a lot of research around, how do people conquer the thing that holds them back? It's really a mindset that holds them back in negotiation more than a skill set. And so one of the things that came out of that was just changing your attitude of, for negotiations, that people think all the time, I'm so anxious going into it. And I try to tell them, but what if you turn it into excitement? And that comes straight from Dr. Kelly McGonigal. So if you could say, I am so excited to show them what I'm made of. I'm so excited to show them my research and all. And I'm so excited to show them all of the wonderful accolades that I have and the reasons why I deserve this salary increase. Or I'm so excited to see what I can conquer from that jerk who sits across the aisle from me in that cubicle and so on. It really does change how you perform. There's some really cool science behind it. But if you're not dreading going into work, you're going to have a better work day.
Yeah.
So if you can just start with that one mindset switch of, I'm so excited, I'm so eager, I'm looking forward to, or maybe it's saying adding into, I haven't done that, or I can't do that yet. That changing it to the future's changeable. The future can be anything I want it to be. Really change your mindset, take that pause, that say less moment to go out of autopilot mode and to make a conscious effort to make every scenario better. And I know it sounds very Pollyanna of me, but I know that it comes out in the performance. Like all of the neuroscience I read about tells us people get better results. So if I'm telling you this is a surefire way to get better results, why wouldn't you take it? It's a simple, 30-second exercise for yourself to go, I am so excited about who I get to talk to at work today. I'm so excited to learn something new today. I'm so excited to shut down that bully that's been bothering me for so long. I'm so excited to not let anything, any of their insults affect me in any way. It's that kind of stuff that I think helped me survive some of the most challenging scenarios that I faced. I recall going deep into the heart of Texas where, men would say to me, what are you going to teach me, little girl? And I was like, oh yeah, you're exactly the guy that I was expecting today. Yeah. This is awesome. Like, I know exactly how to handle this because I was excited to go, what can I do today? And how can I handle this crazy group of people? It was just, it really does make life so much more enjoyable.
So simple. I love it. 3 words. I'm so excited. Well, I'm so excited for us to edit this and get this out to our listeners. This has been really great. It's so great to meet you. Thank you for sharing all of your thoughts and your tips with us today.
Thank you for inviting me to this conversation. I hope that your audience finds it valuable.
Hey, it's Erin with a teeny request. If you have ever gotten any value from this podcast and you'd like us to stick around, plus you want it to continue to grow so we can kind of swindle bigger and more knowledgeable guests to join us and to keep providing you with tangible and inspiring actions you can take to achieve the career and life you deserve, could you please just take 1 minute to leave us a rating and a review? Those reviews go a long way in attracting guests to the show, and candidly, they really make Nicole and I's day. We see you. We really do. So when you have the time and inspiration, we'd love to see a rating and review from you. Thank you.